Every so often, a new video is circulated which demonstrates some Tai Chi master apparently throwing people around without touching them. Sometimes the master uses light contact, and sometimes he or she is several feet away from the other person. Now, these demonstrations very quickly become fodder for both proponents and detractors of Tai Chi, Qigong, psychokinesis, telepathy, religion, and martial arts in general. It's very easy to look at such demonstrations and to dismiss them as obvious fakery. Yet the demonstrations continue to surface with different masters, and they also include a wide variety of volunteers, some of whom are well-respected martial artists with national championships to their names. Now, one of the most recent videos to surface and to invigorate controversy is one showing Madame Yan Fang as she very calmly tosses and flips various students through the air, and the students appear to be alternately amused and shocked. Now, when we witness something that seems too strange to be believed, it is important for us to analyze not only what we are seeing, but the preconceptions and assumptions about what we are witnessing. Now, while some might see a particular phenomenon as a miracle of divine origin, others will see a natural event with a perfectly scientific explanation. And now a bad scientist will jump to conclusions about the mechanisms involved, and bad theologians will preconceive the divinity involved. Now, I know you believe that you understand what you think I just said, but I'm just not so certain that you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. So I'll explain. I have had personal experiences with several such empty force or Kongjing demonstrations, and both as a witness and as a participant. And some demonstrations were performed by honest teachers, and some were performed by those whose presentation might be seen to be a little bit less than honest. I believe I can offer some insights. To the outsider witnessing such demonstrations, it's easy to dismiss the demonstrations as being based merely on the fact that the teacher will almost never demonstrate on someone who is not one of his or her own students. And the teacher will often give an explanation for this. Some of the most common explanations are, probably the best one, is the student needs to have a certain amount of qi and qigong training in order to be able to sense the teacher's qi and to respond honestly. B, another explanation, is that the student needs to have strong qi and have cultivated qigong and be in very good health so that they can withstand the demonstration, so that the teacher's very powerful qi will not injure the student or make them ill. The third is that the demonstration is qi against qi. It's energy working on energy, not on physical matter, so therefore the student must have some qi in order to be pushed around. As Madame Yan Fang said, she said that it's very easy to bounce a balloon when it's inflated, but if there's no air in the balloon, it won't bounce very well. Now, very few people who demonstrate such empty force skill would claim that they would do so in a fight, and that it would work in a fight. And they're often quite upfront about that fact. Actual matches between those who do make such claims and are called to task nearly always end badly. So, what is going on with these empty force demonstrations? Sometimes called Kongjing, sometimes called Fajin, emitting energy or empty force. This fajing, by the way, when it's called fajing, it means emitting energy. It's not the same as the explosive power that's issued in other instances where you actually see a physical movement that's generating physical power. That's more Newtonian mechanics than it is some magical energy. Now, so what's going on with these demonstrations? The students seem to obviously be experiencing something. And perhaps it's a kind of hypnosis or something like that, but perhaps there's something more. But before we attempt any kind of scientific hypothesis, let's just try to understand the experience from a subjective point of view. I'll leave the objective look at the nature of qi to another study. In fact, I did an article that is published at taicicentral.com called What is Qi, which might put some light on it. But for now, let's just hold our noses and assume that there is some subjective and objective experience of something called qi. And let's say that qi is experienced like electricity or some other kind of energy that circulates in the conductive material in the body. And that, let's say, like an electric current, it has a magnetic field. And further, let's assume that one can master the cultivation of this energy to manipulate one's electromagnetic field or qi field in such a way that one can influence or interfere with the magnetic field and the energy in another person's body. Okay, this may be a leap, but let's just assume that that's what goes on, because this is often what is described when people describe this experience. And when we practice, that's often what we visualize. Whether that's actually what happens is beside the point. We're talking about the subjective experience. So this is what people will often describe feeling. Now, sometimes what is really happening is just redirection of intent or changing a person's frame of reference, so that when a person is attacking, you redirect their mind. So if you punch my face and I put my hand up and go like this, you might tend to track my hand. Now, I won't count on that. I'll also get out of the way. I'll also block, but I might try this as a way to redirect your intent. I can do that without touching you. And if you throw a punch and I go like that, then your intent may be redirected as well. But this is not what we're talking about. But that there is that kind of training as well. Now, when people do these empty force demonstrations and they're manipulating the energy flow in another person, there are really, in my experience, two very different types of teachers who demonstrate this practice. There's the good kind, the honest ones, and then there are the bad Jing masters, or the personality cults. Now, a good empty force master, shall we call it that, a good empty force master or teacher will practice manipulating their student's qi and instructing the student to relax, to clear the mind, and to just follow the energy as honestly as possible. And when the student follows the qi correctly, he or she will be moved and will be commended. When the student does not move, the teacher will often just tell them to go away and practice more and come back when they're ready. And when the student does respond, but does so in a way which is not following the instructor's intent, then the teacher will admonish them and say, no, that was you, that was not me. Now, I've had the opportunity to visit some good empty force masters, and I would ask them politely to demonstrate on me or to practice it with me. And when they agree, they usually do so by saying, if they don't know me well, or if they haven't, they don't know my teachers, then they will often say, well, we can give it a try, but we're not promising anything. And now one teacher began by moving his hands with subtle hand gestures and that corresponded to what I was feeling inside my body. And I could feel the energy rising up through my core. And if I had just followed his hand movements, I would have gone up on my toes and then bounced off down the hallway. But at the last moment, I felt the energy drop and I sat right down on the ground. Plump, plunk, like that. And he came over and he congratulated me. He said, very good, very good. So he had deliberately made his external movements different from the energetic intent in order to see if I was responding to qi or to my own ego. I've not always done so well with that demonstration, but I was proud of myself that day for not having an ego. Anyway, the result of this kind of training, why would people do this? Well, when a student practices being pushed around by a good empty force master for a long time, they become extremely good at sensing the opponent's intent. And they're experts at investing in loss and at using the opponent's ego as a weapon. When they engage in a wrestling match or a push-hands match or a fight, such a student will usually be able to flow effortlessly with the opponent's attacks, neutralizing them before they happen. Now, this doesn't mean that they're able to attack as efficiently, but if they're merely being defensive, then they're very good at defending and at evading. The bad empty force master. Well, when bad teachers practice manipulating their students' chi and instruct the students to relax, to clear the mind, and to follow the energy, when the students follow the teacher's chi correctly, the teacher might commend them, or they might just assume an air of superiority. See, I did that with my chi. And when the student does not move, the teacher will tell them to go practice more and come back when they're ready. And when the student responds, but does not do so in a way that is following the teacher's actual intent, the teacher will just change his or her own movements and pretend that they were actually moving the student that way. So the bad empty force master will be less concerned with the student's ability to be balanced and to follow the energy and intent honestly, and be more concerned with looking impressive to the onlookers and to the students. Now, the result of this kind of training is that when a student practices being pushed around by a bad empty force master for a long time, and they become very skilled at being pushed around. When they engage in a wrestling match or a push-hands match or a fight, the student will often flow effortlessly with the opponent's attacks, flying into the air, slamming into the ground, bouncing across the room, and often they'll lose to the opponent even before the opponent attacks. I've pushed hands with students like this, and you make the slightest move and they go flying away, and I think, what in the world? This is ridiculous. And I don't want to play with them anymore because they're just being silly. Now, I'm not going to come to any grand conclusions here, but I do want to say that it is impossible to determine with any certainty by watching whether a performance is real or faked, and sometimes the participants themselves, the instructor included, cannot tell for certain. However, there is something real here. It's just that what is being demonstrated is seldom what is being perceived. And one of the things of which I am certain is that viral videos of empty force demonstrations, whether honest or not, do little to legitimize Tai Chi in the eyes of the general public. They appeal to those who want to have magical powers but are not prepared to work hard and do the work that is required for mastery, and they're not willing to engage on a physical level. Such demonstrations might also discourage other students with a scientific mind who are willing to work hard, who are willing to expect nothing and be prepared for anything. Now, one of my teachers said of empty force demonstrations, he said, middle-level masters will demonstrate these things. High-level masters seldom demonstrate these things, and low-level masters cannot do these things. So it's relatively rare, actually, to find teachers who will openly teach empty force. I've met several who practice this way, who can practice this way, but they prefer to develop their students' sensitivity through toisho, or pushing hands, or through sansho, or through more practical martial applications training. Anyway, keep an open mind, but not too open. You don't want to let the bugs in. As a postscript, I want to add that Madam Yan Fang, who does the demonstration in the video I spoke of, is a respected teacher with students who have proven themselves in national competitions. And she has been forthright about the nature of her demonstrations, and has even gladly demonstrated the ineffectiveness of this type of demonstration on an untrained volunteer. So I cannot, from what I have seen, be critical of what she's doing. Anyway, this is one of those things we sometimes call stupid master tricks. It has value, but as a practice, but not necessarily as a demonstration. I hope that clears something up. Thank you.